Wow. Hello. God, I've never seen this before. This Zoom thing on the computer. It's brilliant. Uh hey, yeah. God, Padmasambhava. My goodness. The more the more I engage with Padmasambhava, the more I realize he's sort of like a whole sort of complex sort of amalgamation of the whole of Buddhism in a way. He's an incredibly complex and rich and vibrant and all-inclusive figure, which is amazing. And Padmasambhava, Padma, lotus, Sambhava, born in the lotus, I think that means. So Padmasambhava was born in a lotus, apparently. So the story goes. And yes, but before we get going on the talk proper, as it were, I just want to pause for a moment. Tomorrow we bury a friend of mine, an old friend who's, he was old, he was 80, so he was old, but I'd also known him about 20 odd years, something like that. And although he wasn't a very intimate friend of mine, we had a very good connection. And I've been very involved in his process of dying in one way or another. That's sort of, in my experience, quite a lot at the moment, and will probably find its way out in the talk. So I want to dedicate this talk to Dougal MacDonald. He was Scottish, Dougal MacDonald. And I'll say a little bit more about him maybe in a bit, but just wanted to share that. And so tonight, in a way, we're sort of entering a different kind of context, a different kind of realm with Padmasambhava than we often live our lives, I think, many of us. You could call it the mythic context. We have retreats called the mythic context sometimes. And I think that's very much, for me, where Padmasambhava resides. That whole relationship I have with Padmasambhava is very much in that domain of the mythic context. And I think for many people, they think the whole thing of myth, symbol, ritual, the imagination. Well, certainly imagine the gods. You think of God. What was it? Was it Nietzsche and his Uberman came down Zarathustra from the mountain and said, "God is dead. God is dead." And I remember in a Mitra study group a long time ago, the Mitra study leader saying, well, the gods are dead here. We've killed off the gods. We've sort of, given way to buying, consuming, and all the rest of it. And we paved over paradise, as it were. And I know what he means. I know what that means. But I think actually the gods are alive. I think the gods are here. It's us who aren't listening to them. And my work is very much in nature. I teach green woodworking, and I'm in nature a lot. I love nature. And through that, at the moment, I do experience that sort of, that life of the spirits and the gods, as it were, working through nature, however you want to interpret that. So I've got two teenage kids. Well, one's 19, one's 17. So yeah, I'm sure they don't think there's any gods and all the rest of it. But then you think of the whole Marvel stories that are so popular at the moment, and anime and stuff like that. I think people really need love, want. In a way, I think the young people that I'm involved in now are probably more engaged and driven by the mythic, by these sort of mythic archetypal characters than maybe many of us often are. Maybe they're in strange form, but I think that's very much there. but that's the sort of realm we're coming into. And on the theme of death and ritual and all the rest of it, I mean, I don't know if any of you watched any of the Queen's funeral, but I did watch a bit. I wasn't going to, I'm not a royalist, and in some ways I'm disgusted by the sort of wealth and privilege and all the rest of it. But for some reason I wanted to, and I did watch some of it, and I appreciated the fact that there was that ritual there to mark that change of, okay, this position, the crown and all the rest of it, but also the, you know, the death of the Queen as a person. I didn't feel there was much room for the person there. I felt the pomp and ceremony sort of took over so much that the people involved in it certainly were so involved in trying to get the ritual right, as it were, and look right, that they lost touch with the fact that there was a dead woman in this coffin. But anyway, I was watching it, and in a way I wasn't that moved. And then the bagpipes started up. The bagpipes started up, and just, you know, the hairs on my body and this sort of rush of energy came up, and it was like, whoa, right. I felt really, you know, electrified by these bagpipes, you know. So it's that sort of realm. It's ritual, it's imagination, it's music, it's poetry, it's all that sort of thing. I think this is the sort of realm that, for me, Padmasambhava resides in, and I really appreciate about him. But, you know, Marvel, anime, Padmasambhava, the gods, whatever, you have to choose your context, your myths, as it were. I think in a way they choose you. There's that element as well. But I think you have to choose wisely who you spend time with. And that's very much what it's about, starting to spend time with these figures like Padmasambhava, and just like any friendship, get to know them, bring them gifts, ask them questions, and just get to know them, you know, and really just simply spend a bit of time looking at their image, thinking about them, reading about them, chanting their mantra or whatever, you know, if it's something like that. But while you do all that, obviously you need to exercise a bit of common sense, you know, with all this sort of area of the Tantra, as it were, and the mythic context. You do need to bring a bit of common sense to the whole thing. Maybe that'll become a bit more apparent as the talk goes on and I talk more about Padmasambhava. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to be approaching it not so much historically as the historical figure, because Padmasambhava was an historical figure from around the 8th century. But he was very much a mythical figure, and for the Tibetans today, is very much like a second Buddha. I mean, for them, he's incredibly, if not the most central figure. I can see why. Yeah. So maybe, so let's see if we can meet Padmasambhava in some form. But yeah, it's very much, you got to develop your own connections and relationships with all of this. And that takes time, like any friendship or any connection, relationship. So, you know, hopefully I can introduce you to Padmasambhava and talk about some of the symbolism and whatever. And, you know, you can see where you want to take it from there and what happens. Okay. So maybe we could start with the first image, and then I'll talk a bit about Padmasambhava. Do you want to give it a go, Vin? I don't know. There you go. Great. Okay. So this is a painting of Padmasambhava by an order member called Arloka. Yeah, so just spend a little while scanning and looking at it, taking it in a bit. And the first time, so Vimalachita was referring to a connection I had early on with Padmasambhava. And the first time that I really met Padmasambhava, which came a bit out of the blue, really, was a long time ago. It was, I think, about 1985 or something like that. And I was on a train. I was a mitra. I was about 23 years old, living in London. And I was on a train to my first week-long London Buddhist Centre summer battle retreat. It was called Battle because it was in this place called Battle where the Battle of Hastings happened. And I was on the train going down there, and decided to meditate while I was on the train. So I did the mindfulness of breathing, just as we do it. And just quite quickly got into it, got absorbed into the breath, and just felt very, very at ease, very relaxed, very happy to be meditating there, not worried by anything on the train. And then quite naturally, my awareness relaxed, and I just started noticing the vibrations in the train and the movement of the train and the sound of the tracks, the wheels going over the tracks, and the sort of clunk, clunk, clunk you get on the train, or at least you did then. And yeah, it was a bit like my awareness just sort of really was just so happy, just sort of listening to, in a way I could sort of feel and see the tracks coming towards me and past me, but very much feeling it through my body, which was just, it was great. It was really lovely. And I was just really happily doing that when I just seemed to drop into a huge cavern, a huge dark cavern, which was illuminated by red light, orange red light. And that was because the floor of this huge cavern that I found myself in was molten lava. It was completely molten. So it was like I was inside a volcano, I suppose. And so I was sat there for, I don't know how long it was, but not too long it felt, before up out of the molten lava, pristine and as if untouched by the lava, rose and slipped Padmasambhava right in front of me. So the first thing that came up was his trident. I don't know if you can see it there. The three-pronged trident. That was the first thing that came. Oh, well done. And then these three heads below it. Thank you. And then the whole figure of Padmasambhava just sort of came up, rose up right in front of me, and just was there. And there was Padmasambhava. The train, the journey, my body, everything was completely, you know, not there. There I was with Padmasambhava. And it was just such a sort of solid, simple, relaxed, intense experience. Yeah, he didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. We just looked at each other, I suppose. So let's just, this image that you're seeing now is pretty much what I saw in a way. And I suppose so let's just look at this figure in front of us. So I suppose one of the first things to say about Padmasambhava is redness. So red, if you think of red in terms of, so here we're talking symbolism. So, you know, all these things that we talk about can be loads of different things. In a way, that's their power. I think that's the power of symbolism, that it's not just one thing. And I think the imagination works in sort of multi-dimensional connections, if you see what I mean, not just linearly. So red, passion, love, vitality, a life, blood, it's all these things, isn't it? And Padmasambhava is sat on a red lotus. And he is actually a member of the lotus family. So in Buddhism, these different bodhisattvas and Buddha figures sort of have families, basically, where they sort of have a collection of Buddhas or bodhisattvas that have a tendency towards one sort of quality or another. So Padmasambhava, as I said in the beginning, was lotus born. So he was, apparently, as the story goes, he was born of Amitabha, who's the Buddha of infinite light, was meditating, and from his tongue, a red ray of light beamed out and down into a lake in northeastern India in an area called Udayana. And then an island formed, lovely plants formed, and then a lotus plant formed on there. And this red lotus opened. And then another light, I think, emanated from its heart and went out, and Padmasambhava was born of that in the lotus. So this is a really crucial thing with Padmasambhava, with this whole lotus family. If you think of a flower, it's just perfectly natural thing. You can't, you know, I know in some places they force plants and whatever, but in this symbolism, it just naturally grows. You just give it the right conditions and it naturally grows and opens and unfolds. So this is very much the essence of the lotus family. That's very natural, very relaxed. It's about just being here with what's naturally growing, what's naturally there, not sort of forcing anything. So then in his right hand, you can see he's got what's called a Vajra. So he's holding, in this one, he's holding it like this in the demon subduing mudra. So the Vajra, as many of you will know, is this sort of, well, basically it's the lightning thunderbolt. So that's the symbolism. He's holding a thunderbolt in his hand. So this, in a way, is quintessentially sort of breaking through delusions into liberation. That's what that symbolizes. So it's a bit like a nighttime, you know, you're in the night, out in the night, in the fields or on top of a hill, lightning flashes and boom, you can see everything clearly in a flash, just like that. So he holds the Vajra, double-edged Vajra, in his right hand. And in his left hand, to his sort of just below his heart there, he's holding a vase of immortality. And this vase of immortality, paradoxically enough, is floating in a skull cup full of nectar or blood. So you've got immortality and a skull cup, a human skull. So there's that. So yes, the trident, this Katvanga thing, is called a Katvanga in Tibetan, I think. So this is sometimes referred to as his Dakini, or his inspiration. And as you can see, it's a trident. So what do you do with a trident with 3 spikes on the end? You spike things, don't you? You lance them, you pierce them, you catch them. And what he's caught here, which you can see just below the trident sort of prongs on the top, is 3 heads. So these are 3 heads, 3 severed heads in sort of progression of decay. So the first one at the bottom, the sort of pink one, this is a freshly severed head. So it's someone freshly dead, as it were. The next one is sort of greeny color, I think, from what I can see. And that's supposed to be a head, a carcass that's decayed. And then above that, you've got a skull. So a couple of sort of readings of this are, one of the primary ones is, of course, impermanence and the fact that we all will die. You know, it's as simple as that. So there's no shying away from the difficult things in life with Padmasambhava. He is there. If there's something difficult going on, if there's sort of a crisis in your life, he's the man to get there, if you can get him there. Another thing that they often symbolize is the three poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion. So in a way, he's sort of pierced, he's penetrated through greed, hatred, and delusion with his Katvanga, but also impermanence. So he's gone into them, as it were. And then below them is a vase of initiation. So we'll probably say a bit more about initiation later on. But that's very significant that it's there with these freshly severed heads. And then below that is another Vajra. And hanging down, there's a drum and banners, and I think the flags from the 5 Dhyana Buddhas and stuff like that. So in a way, this is all his tantric gear. He's a tantric practitioner. He sort of practices tantric meditations, visualizations, magic even, and this is all his gear. So, you know, he's got what he needs to deal with whatever's going to go on at whatever depth. So there's that. And then I think the next thing to talk about probably is the robes. So what he's wearing. So the lower robe, or the middle robe, as it were, is the golden robe that you can see here. This is the robe of a traditional original monk from the Hinayana tradition. So a monk, or you know, who was ordained with the Buddha or followed the Buddha in the early days. And then on the outside of that, he's got a red cloak, which symbolizes the Mahayana. So the Hinayana was like the first sort of movement of Buddhism, if you like, original Buddhism, as taught by the Buddha. And their sort of texts are things like the early suttas, the Udana, all those sort of traditional ancient texts, which are fantastic and very much, I suppose, in a way, you know, concerned with discipline, renunciation, giving up, simplicity, all those sort of, you know, tranquility, all that sort of thing. And then the red robe of the Mahayana was a sort of a second kind of wave of rejuvenation historically in Buddhism, which is very much about the Bodhisattva ideal. So very much about love, compassion, outward goingness, helping people with their suffering, devoting yourself to alleviating suffering, really. So this is, it's very important that he has that cloak on as well. And then he's got this blue shirt underneath all of that, which symbolizes the Vajrayana, what's called the Vajrayana. So the Vajrayana is, in a way, well, the Vajra, the thunderbolt, it's supposed to be sort of like the tantric, the immediate way to break through. And this was, in a way, the most recent development historically. But I suppose the thing to say about him is, rather than it being historical like that, Padmasambhava as an historical figure, but I think also symbolically, mastered and practiced all those different approaches to Buddhism. So he didn't leave behind the Hinayana and the original sort of monk renunciation and all the rest of it. He embraced that, he kept that within his practice as well. And I think one of the important things about that for us, that's relevant to us today in Triratna, it occurs to me, is that Sangharajta, who founded Triratna, founded it on the basis of a non-sectarian approach. So we draw from all the different schools of Buddhism, whatever seems to be relevant and really effective and really essentially Buddhist. We draw on all those different schools. So we're not a Zen school, we're not a Tibetan school, we're not a sort of Hinayana school, a Theravadan school, or anything like that. We draw from, in a sense, all those schools. And this is partly because, I think, because some of his teachers, Tibetan teachers, were very much of that approach themselves. So there were some of his teachers who were part of a thing called the Rimpoche tradition. And what they did was they went round all the different schools of Tibetan Buddhism, and they learnt as many of the practices and practiced them, not just learnt them, practiced them as they could. So they weren't in any particular school in Tibetan Buddhism. And I think Sangharajta, who took initiation from some of them and got practices from them and had them as his teacher, I think that really came through. And for me, I'm just so glad that that's the case, because sometimes Zen things immediately are relevant to my practice and my life, and at other times Tibetan things are. So I think that's really significant for me and the value to us now. Yeah. What next? I suppose the next thing probably is his face. So maybe Vimalachita, can you do the next slide? So this is a Tibetan rupa, very much a sort of traditional sort of image that you would find in a Tibetan temple, Gompa. And I chose this one because I think it's just got such a great face for what Padmasambhava is well known for, which is that he has what's often called a wrathful smile. So you can see he's got this sort of knitted brow, furrowed sort of brow. He's got these wide open eyes. But at the same time, he's got this really kind, lovely, welcoming smile. So you got that paradox of someone who's really looking into you, really sort of present with everything that's going on, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. And yet it's the basis of it is this sort of incredible kindness and generosity and concern and engagement. So, and he's got long hair. So he's a monk. He's got long hair. He's got all this tantric gear. He's got these different symbols, like you've got these sort of, you've got the skull cup with a vase of long life in it. So there's a lot of paradox in this figure, which I think it helps it to sort of lift it out of a rational kind of zone, if you see what I mean. And then, so lastly, that I'm going to talk about is his hat. So you can see his hat there. And this is a scholar's hat. So Padmasambhava was a very, very accomplished scholar, as well as being a very, very deep meditator and practitioner and tantric practitioner. And he's got it sort of turned up. Normally, the sides are down, actually. When you see Tibetan lamas, they have the cap folded down. But he's got it jauntily sort of folded up. And I think for me, that's sort of like he's completely versed and completely got the teachings, but he's not sort of over dogmatic about it. He's pretty relaxed about it. You know, he uses it, but he's not stuck on it. Has to be to the letter, as it were. And then on top of the hat, which you can't really see here, is a Vajra, another Vajra, very crucial for Padmasambhava. And in a way, the Vajra, I think, another key thing of the Vajra with Padmasambhava is awareness. It's sort of like pure awareness that just sees through everything, not in a forceful way, but just quite simply breaks through, as it were. And then above the Vajra is a white vulture feather. And yeah, so vultures, I think what the reason why that's there, traditionally speaking, is that vultures, if you've seen them, they fly very, very high. So they have a fantastic view of the whole land below them. And they fly effortlessly. So they seem to glide on the air without any effort. So they fly very high. And there's a saying that Padmasambhava said that although my view is higher than the sky, my respect for the cause and effect of actions is as fine as grains of flour. So again, you've got this sort of, not exactly paradox, but these sort of embracing two different aspects. So his view and I think what they mean by that is his spiritual sort of insight and experience, or the place he dwells at, is higher than the sky. He's saying, you know, it's sort of like so clear and perfect in a sense, and yet he's completely meticulous about his ethical conduct, about the way he acts in relation to the world. And I think that's very important. Next slide. Is that possible? So this image here, I don't know, when I saw this image, it really struck me. I don't know, I think it might be the eyes, but there's something about the face that I find very appealing. And funnily enough, how Vimalachita put this in this sort of blurb, you know, talking about this thing. And we didn't talk about these images, but we'd come up with two images the same. And I think this one of the things is he's just so open. He just looks so open and fresh and relaxed, and yet so piercingly there. And I think I read somewhere that this image is supposed to be the most close to likeness of what his face looked like. I don't know. Maybe it was. Okay. So can we lose the slides now, Vimalachita? Is that possible? Great, thanks. Okay, so let's see. Yeah. Okay. So vultures. I spent just over 2 years in Spain, helping to set up and build a retreat center there we call Guhyaloka, where it's the retreat center. We built it specifically for male men to go and get ordained. And we've got obviously the same for women as well. And I went out there in the beginning when it was just a mountain. We had nothing there. There was no running water, you know, in terms of taps, no electricity or anything like that. We just had a mountain and a couple of wrecks, and there was a little sort of bungalow, rundown bungalow and whatever there. And anyway, there was a team of guys. We went out there and we lived out there and we built the retreat center there. And I got ordained while I was there after about, I think, 9-10 months of doing the building work. We had our first ordination retreat, and I was ordained on that retreat. And while on that retreat, one of the days I was out walking and there was a storm blowing in over the mountains. So it's up in the mountains near the Mediterranean coast, just inland from Benidorm, weirdly enough. But you felt like you were a million miles away from Benidorm. So as this storm was blowing in, there was this huge bank of black clouds just coming in over the biggest mountain. And ahead of this big black cloud, wheeling round and round and round ahead of it were 9 vultures, 9 huge griffon vultures, which we did get sometimes, and eagles and all sorts of amazing birds, actually. So these vultures were sort of wheeling around, coming towards us as this sort of cloud, bank of dark clouds came over. And yeah, so they were wheeling over in above us, as it were, very, very high. And then at one point, when they were pretty much right over us, one of the birds started, they were all sort of doing this circular thing as they moved around, going on the thermals. And one of them just started coming lower and lower down towards us. And the others sort of carried on wheeling and carrying on sort of over our heads and back across the other mountains. But this one vulture came lower and lower down like this. And then another one came back and lowered, came down as well. And then the one that'd come down first, the lowest one, just tumbled out of the sky. It just sort of, its wings collapsed and it just tumbled. It was still quite high, so it took quite a time. And we just stood there going, oh my God, what is it doing? And it died on the wing. It just died. And I know that because here he is. This is the vulture who died on the wing. So I watched him die. And it was a year before I found his carcass. And by then, he had ended up as bones like this. And I managed to get a feather. So this is a real vulture's feather. And this is on my shrine. These are on my shrine. They've been on my shrine ever since then. So this is, yeah, this is, what was it? What did he say? How long? 35 years or something like that. This skull is 35 years old. It's amazing. And for me, it's very much about, because what happened was that vulture, the second vulture that came down after the first one, stayed there for a while, just circling round, while the others had wheeled on away. And then eventually, it just glided. It didn't flap its wings or anything. It literally just and shot off and caught up with the others. So for me, yeah, vultures and vultures' feathers, they're incredible things. And I think vultures also, one of the things that I think is amazingly symbolic about them is they fly effortlessly high, and yet what do they eat? What do they live on? They live on dead carcasses. So they imbibe the dead. And for Padmasambhava, I think that's really significant. I think that, you know, Padmasambhava is someone that can help you go into, in a sense, your worst nightmares, your deepest fears, your most sort of panic-stricken moments. Padmasambhava is a figure that can help you meet that in a creative way and, in a sense, meet it in a way that can liberate your energies that are tied up in resisting it or fearing it or whatever. Anyway, there you go. Right, so Padmasambhava, so I'll just put the feather down there. How are we doing for time? Oh, blimey, time. Padmasambhava, one of the key stories in Padmasambhava's life is that he's famous for helping to establish Buddhism in Tibet. So I'm just going to recount the story in rough of what happened with that. So this is the 8th century we're talking about, late 1700s. So it's sort of medieval times. And Padmasambhava was, a scholar. He was a deep meditator. He'd been initiated into lots of different tantric practices. In fact, he came from an area that at that time was just like a sort of honeypot of really inspired practitioners. So in a way, he wasn't just a lone figure. He didn't come out of nowhere. And he traveled all over visiting different teachers, you know, to sort of perfect his practice. So in Tibet at that time, the indigenous religion, which I think is still there to some extent, was the Bon, the religion of the Bon, which was a very animistic, very alive, very magical sort of way of engaging in your spiritual practice. And the king at the time, King Trisong actually was really taken with Buddhism and wanted to try and establish Buddhism in Tibet. So he actually managed to build some temples, some gompas in Tibet, and he wanted someone from India to come up and help teach Buddhism, because Buddhism had been going for 1,000 years in India by this time, pretty much. So he invited up a very, very eminent Buddhist called Shantirakshita. And Shantirakshita went up to meet King Trisong, and he taught the Dharma, and he helped to try and sort of build these temples. And they decided they were going to build a really big special temple, which was called Samye Monastery. And they were going to build it in the form of a mandala. So they started building that. And meanwhile, Shantirakshita just taught. That's what he did, apparently. He taught the Dharma. And he taught foundational Dharma. Apparently he taught, I mean, he was brilliant. He was brilliant. So he taught exactly what they needed. They needed, you know, teaching about the precepts, ethical precepts. He taught about meditation. He taught about how to sort of explore the mind. And so that was great. So he taught and taught and taught. But what basically happened was that the local gods, in a sense, the sort of the collective sort of unconscious of the Tibetan people started to rebel. They didn't really like this. There was something in it that just sort of wound them up. And so they rebelled. And so the story goes that they were building the monastery during the day. They would start, you know, put their stones on, and they'd be working away and then go to bed. And at night, in the dark, in the depths of the nighttime, the gods would come and pull it all down. So there was Shantirakshita trying to help the king establish Buddhism in Tibet. He seemed to be doing all the right things, and yet there was all this trouble. There was this great resistance. And so fortunately, Shantirakshita realized that he just wasn't going to be able to do it. He couldn't do it. So he talked to the king, and basically he said, look, we're going to have to call my mate. We're going to have to call a friend. Okay, we're going to call a friend, and I know someone called Padmasambhava. We're going to have to get Padmasambhava up, because he can connect with the gods. He'll be able to sort this out, no problem. So they got Padmasambhava to come up to help establish Buddhism in Tibet. And I think one of the things is basically with this that it's not enough just to teach the Dharma in a rational way, or to practice it in a rational way, even a really good way, because we're not completely rational beings. How do you deal with the unconscious? So that's what's symbolized by this story. You need to engage and channel the irrational forces of your unconscious. So you can take this story as a metaphor for your own practice, but obviously it really was what was going on as well in Tibet, quite literally as well. Now, I know that sounds a bit weird, me saying that, and maybe you think, yeah, no, it wasn't literally that the gods would go in there and pull the stuff down. But actually, I have got a bit of an experience of something a bit similar to this. So when I was living in Guhyaloka, as I said, in this retreat center that I helped build, we were up the mountain, and it was really elemental, really elemental. And, you know, it wasn't like you didn't feel sheltered by your nice double glazing and all the rest of it. I mean, we were living very, very roughly. And when whatever happened with the weather, you knew it, and it affected what you were doing. And we were building, at the time, we were building these huts for the retreatants to come and sleep in. We called them yeso huts. Yeso was the word, Spanish word for plaster. And we were making them out of plaster. We were casting these sort of like arched rooms, basically. And we were digging out the ground, which meant we didn't have diggers. So that was with a pickaxe and lump hammers. And there were some big rocks there. I mean, I still know some of those rocks intimately. And so anyway, we were building these yeso huts, and you had to climb up on top of the hut, which we'd sort of made these formers and these sort of molds to pour this yeso into to make these huts. And there'd been a bit of rain. There'd been a bit of rain, well, quite a bit of rain, actually. And there were a couple of guys on top of one of these huts. And what was usually happening at this point, because we'd done most of the roof, was that guys would be inside tidying up and doing various things. Well, one of these huts with these guys on top collapsed. It collapsed down, and this was like about this thick of plaster over a big arch. So, and fortunately, no one was inside underneath working on the inside, which was really lucky, because that probably would have been a ton or two of stuff come down on them. And it really, really shook up a lot of the people in the community, in the building team that was there. And we had to have a big meeting about it. And there were some people who were really, really freaked out by it. And some of them decided to leave. They had to leave because it was just too much. It was too elemental. They left. And what we did then, we did basically the Padmasambhava Thunder Cave Puja. So we went in a procession to a cave that was just over the end of our valley, in a procession, and we did a Padmasambhava Puja deep in this cave. And this was a cave that people hid in the Civil War with Franco and all the rest of it. So there were lots of different writings in there. So it was had a very strong atmosphere in there. So we did this puja by candlelight in this cave. We came out, and then a thunderstorm just broke out. So that's why we called it the Padmasambhava Thunder Cave Puja. And anyway, so basically we went back, we rethought the arches, we built the huts, and they were only supposed to be there for one of these retreats, and then we were going to build something more permanent. They're still standing. They're still there, 35, 37, 38 years or whatever it is later. And Samye Monastery that Padmasambhava managed to help get built is still there as well. So from the 8th century, that monastery is still there, which is amazing, really. So I'm just going to read something from this book here. This is called The Life and Liberation of Padmasambhava. And I'm going to do a little reading from that, just so you can get a sense of a more direct sense of the sort of Tibetan story, rather than just me doing it anecdotally, as it were. And yeah, so this is, which one is this? Right, okay. So it goes in different chapters called cantos. This is canto number 60 from The Life and Liberation of Padmasambhava, and it's titled, The Evil Genies of Tibet Are Mastered and Bound by Oath. So this is from the story of Padmasambhava. So I'm not going to read it all because it would take too long. But it goes, this is talking of Padmasambhava. Then he pushed on to the fort called the Bird's Nest of Oyug. The great Gyanan, Dorje Legpa Kong, appeared amid his retinue of 360 brothers. Padma, that's Padmasambhava, bound them all by oath and left a treasure in their care. Then, when he came to the valley of Shampo, Shampo appeared, the white yak, the size of a mountain, from mouth and nostrils exhaling whirlwinds and snow tempests. But using the iron hook mudra, the guru seized him by the muzzle, bound him with the mudra of the noose, chained him with the mudra of the shackles, and with the bell of mudra, flogged him, body and mind. Now, when the yak gave the heart of his life, the guru bound him by oath and entrusted him with a treasure. To test the guru, so he goes through all these different sort of demons that he meets. To test the guru, the spirit of Argalis Plateau took on the guise of a white reptile and blocked his path. The head reached the district of the Uyghurs, while the tail coincided with the Sog River of Kams and Gir Montang. With a staff, the guru transfixed the serpent through the middle. So that's his Katvanga, his trident. You are the King Naga, chalk color, king of the Gandharvas, with the 5 hair coils. Depart and prepare yourself to make circular oblation. The spirit fled to the ice-cold snows, but the snows melted, and when the greenish ice had given way, the black mountain peak could be seen. The spirit could withstand no longer, so he served a Gana chakra decked with dainties, and changing into a child wearing a turquoise hairnet and a turban of white silk, he did obeisance and circumambulated. He gave the heart of his life, and having been bound by oath, he was given 100 treasures to watch over. As his secret name, he was called Major Vajra of great power. And so it goes on. So there's this sort of this sequence of Padmasambhava. This is Padmasambhava actually earlier on in his life, on the way to Tibet. So he's meeting all these demons in Tibet and he's subduing them. And as he does that, in a way, he's sort of bringing in those unconscious forces, those sort of wayward, unruly forces into line with the Dharma. And yeah, that's what we need to do as well. We need to do that as well. There's another one on that. But how did he do that? How does he get them to, how does he bind them? How does he get them to give over their life energy? And I think the secret to that lies in something earlier in his life when he visits cremation grounds. So Padmasambhava, when he was younger, in his earlier days of practice, he visited a lot of cremation grounds and charnel grounds and meditated in those places and met loads of demons, internal, external, and practiced in that context, meeting, as it were, his deepest fears, what might be most frightening, as it were. And I suppose the other thing about that for me is that it represents direct experience. So it's no good us just sort of having ideas about meeting our deepest fears or you know, going into the depths of the unconscious or overcoming intense hatred or whatever. We really, really have to live through it. It's only through living through it, as it were, through this sort of turning towards it with awareness, that we're really going to learn the lessons, that we really can sort of glean the insights that are there. And they're there all the time because life is presenting us with the realities of impermanence, for example, all the time. So it's up to us to turn and face it. I'll just read another quick bit from the book. This is, let me see this one. So this is about him in the cemetery. Yes, okay, this is Canto 29. The sojourn in the cemetery of Body's End, where he received the name of Nima Odsa. Then the bhikkhu, Shakyasenji, that's Padmasambhava's name at this time, came to the country called Beda, in which is the great cemetery of Body's End, with a perimeter of 3.5 leagues at the center of the Mount Potala Stupa, built of a precious crystal substance. In the rear is the great monastery of Tsarima. In the east is the supernatural tree which radiates magic force, a tree of the tombs frequented by many birds of the tombs, beneath dwelling thaumatangs of non-human race, who turn beautiful women into bitches, who change pebbles and pieces of wood into living beings and skeletons, who change planets, stars, sun and moon into desiccated corpses, and work all sorts of similar prodigies. To the south of the cemetery, and formed by the water from the tombs, is the lake of contiguity, which has at its center skeletons issuing from the fivefold lotus stand, and all around the intimate glow of the cemetery fires reveals, amid the flames, bodies open or in pieces, with skin, hands, feet, fresh and in decay, burnt, not burnt, or burnt incompletely. To the west, the obituary wind spirals in tempest force, and in the wind's midst, troops of Bhutas and of the deceased, riding on children, sheep, bulls, and skeletons, bear off, some of them in the infirm, some of them the dead, some of them snot, some of them fire and water, some of them melted fat, and some strips of flesh. And to the north lies moving vastness, the mountain of tombs, and there the king of the mountain of tombs, intensely busy, presides amid the abodes of all the funeral prowlers. And at his waist he has a Chintamani treasure. From there, in an easterly direction, the god protector of the world, Mahapalasvara, with a yak's body and lion's face, terminating in a serpent shape and mounted on a raksha, holds the Katvanga and raises the cadaver banner, and he is surrounded by shadowy silhouettes. Now, to the south, with his mind expanded and his face having turned a deep red, the saint, that's Padmasambhava, entered into ecstasy, and in this charnel ground, his back against the stupa, he remained for 5 years, expounding the Dharma to the Darkinis. And thereupon the name of Nima Odsa was bestowed on him, and action for the benefit of others stretched forth its fruit and branches. So there you get a taste of the cemetery, as it were. I'm running out of time. Let's see. So I'll finish off now. Let me see if there's something I can finish off with, which might be helpful to finish off. Yes, I'm just going to finish off with a little personal anecdote, actually, which should tie this together, I think, a bit. Yes, so how does that translate to us here, now, living our lives, you know, doing our washing up, taking out the bin and, you know, chatting to our friends and all the rest of it. And, well, I'll just give you a little example for me, okay? So not that long ago, I was stood washing up at the washing up bowl. And I won't give the background to how this happened or why this is happening, but basically I started feeling really scared. And I felt a great weight and tightness on my chest. And this just continued to build up as I was washing, to the extent that I was starting to panic. And I realized I need to actually get somewhere safe. So this is where common sense comes in. You know, if there's something to be fearful of, you don't have to just face it in the sense of, oh yeah, come and kill me or whatever. Get somewhere safe, look after yourself, okay? So I went up to my room. I've got a room of my own. I went up to my bedroom, and I can't remember exactly what point this happened, but basically I got a message through from a really good friend of mine called Suvajra. And the message was just an image. So, Chitta, could we have the next? Oh, it might not be the next one. It might be the one after, Avalokiteshvara. He sent through this image that we'll see in a minute. Not that one. Not that one. That's him in the cremation ground. This one. So Suvajra just sent me this picture, just out of the blue, right in the middle, as I was in the middle of this terror. This is a painting that I did a long time ago of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion, in royal ease, so he's very relaxed. And this just really turned things around for me. So I was in my room and I was on the verge of literally breaking down. All I could manage to do was type on my phone, help. I just typed help. And then that's all I could manage, otherwise I was just going to fall apart. And I had a meeting that I was supposed to be going to soon. So this message came back. It was something like, it was very simple. It was like, what's happening? How can I help? And, you know, because of all our approach in Buddhism and all the rest of it, I knew what I had to do. I'd removed myself from the immediate threat. All I was dealing with now was my own fear. So I knew I had to turn towards it. So I just typed, I need help to face my own fear. And then he sent me back a message saying, what you need is this. And I'll read it out. It's from June. And it goes, I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. So in a way, it's not perfectly Buddhist, but to me at that moment in time, that was like a whispered sort of a teaching from Suvajra, and I knew what it meant. I knew what I had to do. So that was it. I just went, okay. And I literally put my arms out like that, threw myself back on my bed and thought, okay, come on then. And I just let the fear right in, relaxed, opened up, let the fear in. And for a moment, it was as if 1,000 dogs or wolves were tearing at my face, and then it was gone. And yeah, I think that's part of it. I think for me, that's Padmasambhava. It's sort of meeting those moments with guidance, as it were. So Padmasambhava is often called the tantric guru. I think of him as a guide. And if we do that, then we're going, as it were, into the conditioned, into our sort of reactive habitual mind, in my case at that moment, fear. But by doing that in that sort of way, with the perspective that you're not getting lost in it, you're not trying to keep it away, but you are allowing it in, and that changes you, and that changes the experience. And through that, you can gain some liberation. So it wasn't long after that, that in the context of a dream, and I will finish off now, I was in this dream and I was in an order context where we went into a shrine room and we were all sitting down to meditate. And we sat down to meditate. There was someone at the front who was introducing and whatever. and they were introducing someone to come in and give a teaching or something like that. And I thought it was going to be, this was in the dream, I thought it was going to be Sangharakshita, you know, who ordained me and our founder, as it were. So by this moment, the whole dream had become much more vivid and much more electrified, as it were. But it wasn't Sangharakshita who walked in, it was a Dakini. It was a Dakini called Machid Labdram. So if we have the final image, so here we have this Dakini. So this Dakini walked in, and I was like, oh my God, what is going to happen here? So then she gave the teaching, and the teaching was, which I think is really significant to our group as well, which I think is partly fed by our group. So what she did was she led us in the transference of merit and self-surrender. So a lot of you will know that, some of you won't. And so we started doing it, and then just go, no, 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 no. You've got to really put yourself into it. You've got to throw yourself into it and really do it loudly. So then we all whoom, and did the transference of merit and self-surrender, which is basically the sort of commitment to the Bodhisattva vow, the sort of commitment to, I suppose, helping everyone gain enlightenment and alleviate suffering. So this is the kind of thing that can happen if we really meet our conditioned nature and really sort of penetrate it from the perspective of the Dharma. These things just naturally happen, amazingly enough, even today. So it's not just Padmasambhava in the 8th century. I think it's still relevant to us today.